reached our very first keynote session of the day, Marketing in the Era of Generative AI, Challenges and Opportunities. How would marketing evolve in an era where AI is better than the average human at telling stories, drawing images, composing melodies, engaging in conversations, and creating virtual worlds? We will talk about what's happening right now and what is likely to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. And ladies and gentlemen, for our very first keynote session of the day, joining us on stage is Dr. Praphul Chandra, co-founder and advisor, TreasurePACK. Dr. Chandra works at the intersection of decentralization and machine learning. He's particularly interested in how Web3 and AI will impact enterprises, economy, and society at large. Over the past 2 decades, his career has spanned industry, academia, and startups. Dr. Chandra serves as an adjunct professor of data science at Case Western Reserve University and as a member of the board of academic studies at Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences. He has authored 22 papers, 18 patents, and 2 books. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and join me in welcoming Dr. Praphul Chandra.
Thank you. Hey, good morning. So it's interesting that in the last hour or so since the session started, we talked about learning from the next generation, right? Amit talked about reverse mentoring. And I think the gentleman here on the first seat talked about learning from his child. And I think that's probably a good leeway into what I'm going to talk about. I was talking to Kalpana earlier, and I was telling her that I'm in equal parts scared and excited about what's coming. And my feeling and what I plan to achieve in the next 25, 30 minutes is hopefully that you go away with the same feeling, that it's an exciting world, it's a scary world that is coming, and hopefully MMA can do something about it too. And I will end with suggesting what MMA can do about it because this is the right forum for this. Okay? So let's get started, right? This is one of the challenges in talking about generative AI is that you can never reuse your slide deck, right? And you have to always keep updating it on a weekly basis, right? This is less than a week old, right? So there's a conference where these people had a bunch of marketing experts create ads, a few ads, and then they had generative AI create ads. And they showed the ads to a bunch of marketing professionals. And they asked them, can you tell us which ad was created by generative AI and which ad was created by marketing experts, right? And since you can imagine what happened, right? They fooled, the majority of the judges were wrong, right? So they cannot distinguish, even the marketing experts cannot distinguish between ads which were created by AI versus ads that were created by marketing professionals. I want you to take a moment to think about what just happened, right? What just happened is the acknowledgement of the fact that creativity, which we have always thought of as something which is very human, is no longer the domain of humans only, right? You have generative AI now doing stuff which we always thought was human, very human. And this is the structure of the talk, right? I'm going to talk about what really is this technology all about. I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the opportunities in AI, and I'm going to talk about why I'm scared and why probably a lot of you should be scared too, right? So let's start with what is AI, because there are a lot of terminology and keywords floating around, and people using the terms in very different ways. I'll just give you a 3-part definition. The first part is generative AI is AI which can generate, right? It can create. And what can it create? Today it can create vast kinds of stuff. It can create audio, it can create video, it can create text, it can create virtual gaming environments, it can create 3D objects, just a wide variety of stuff that it can create. Generative AI uses something called foundation models. And this is part where it gets really, really interesting. What it does is that there's been a paradigm shift, right? Again, Amit talked about data and analytics. Absolutely, that has been around for some time now. But what is happening is that once you did analytics for a particular set of data or a particular problem statement, that model or that data lived independently. Now what is happening is there is a creation of a set of AI models which are so intelligent that it can do multiple tasks, right? And that is the idea behind foundation models, right? AI models that can be adapted to a wide variety of tasks, right? And third part is that it is very hard to explain how they work. I'm not saying it's hard to explain to the layman, I'm saying it's just hard to explain, period. Which means even the people who build it don't understand how they work, right? Which is scary, right? So that's what I mean when I say generative AI. Now, why is it scary good? If you look at this chart, and this chart starts to tell you what is the proficiency of one of these AI models called GPT-4 on the verbal SAT scores, right? So, if you look at it, GPT performs at 99 percentile. What that means is that AI is better than 99% of humans in verbal SAT. And today, this number is getting incremented to more and more tasks. In fact, today AI is greater than 90% of humans in many tasks, right? It can ace the SAT, it can ace the GRE, and it can clear the bar exam in the US for law. Right? This is today, okay? And what people miss is how fast it grows, and I'll talk about that, right? Now, third part, unlike it does not only talk about text, it can understand images. So its method of learning is not text only. It can look at an image, it can stand here, look at an image, and understand what's going on, okay? And I want to drive home this point. It is really scary good. I cannot say this enough. Okay? For those, everybody seen The Matrix? Yes? Yeah? This is a scene in The Matrix when Neo and Trinity are there to free Morpheus. They have freed Morpheus. And they run to the roof, and there's a helicopter standing there. And Neo asks Trinity, do you know how to fly that thing? Right? And she says, give me a minute. She calls the operator, and she says, download, how should I fly this helicopter? And then she says, now I do. Right? This is how AI models learn. They learn faster than humans. This is the speed at which they learn. Right? And they learn from each other. Which means if you teach one AI model something, it is now possible for that AI model to share that learning with another model, so that model also learns that. Right? This is scary stuff. Right? The amount of data on which these models have been trained, the trainers don't know what they know. I'll say that again. The people who have built these models don't know what the models know. Forget that they don't know how they work. They don't know what they know, right? They are figuring out that GPT-4 models can pass a chemistry exam, right? And this is why it's really scary good, okay? Now, that's the context of what I'm going to talk about. Why am I talking about at MMA, right? What does this mean for marketing professionals, right? Okay, so here are two ads. First thing it means is exponential personalization, right? And what that means is this will happen at scale, and it will happen affordably, right? There are negative implications to that statement as to what it will mean for the amount of work left and amount of humans needed, but that's a separate conversation that's coming later. But this is exponential personalization, right? Now, on the left is probably something that all of you have seen. This is an ad that was made with Shah Rukh Khan. It was a video ad, and it used a technology called deepfake. And what you could do is, if you had a retail store, you could go to a website and customize the ad so that Shah Rukh Khan invited you to the nearest retail store to your house, to your retail store. And the person who was watching the ad could not tell whether it was really Shah Rukh Khan speaking or somebody else, right? So this probably you have seen. I want you to look at the picture on the right. This is a Levi's model wearing a Levi's dress. The only thing is that this is not a human. This image was created by AI. Right? So you have now AI models. And why do you need AI models? Well, you need a model that looks and feels like the person who you are targeting. So think about what that means. A model that looks and feels and talks like you. Right? So the idea of personalized ads, and Amit briefly talked about it, Google and Meta have already released platforms which can do this today. A personalized ad for the long tail of consumers, happening through algorithms, without human agencies, without media agencies sitting in the middle and doing the customization, without the need for multiple models being hired. This is happening at scale affordably today. Right now, they look like you. Right? In the next 12 to 18 months, expect these models to talk like you, behave like you, maybe like your friends or your idols. And I cannot emphasize this again. This will happen at scale. This will happen affordably. Right? And they will speak in your language. They will talk about locations where you sit in. And we talked about 2 examples. Right? This is generative AI. Okay? Second thing that's going to happen is exponential engagement. What does that mean? Well, you will have chatbots who will engage with the user to make sure that they stay engaged with the content on your platform. Right? If you have ever played with ChatGPT and you can get sucked into conversation for minutes together, the average time span or attention span for ChatGPT is not 3 seconds or 8 seconds, it's minutes. Right? Now imagine what that means for engaging your audience. Right? Now, the picture on the right is another interesting story. This is a social media influencer. And she has created an audio avatar which she's selling for $1 a month subscription so that this audio avatar will act like your girlfriend. Okay? It's not very far-fetched to imagine avatars and shopping assistants that brands would like to create to engage the audiences. Right? So that's what's going to happen. Now, the third thing that's going to happen is exponential influence. Right? And I want to play about a 1-minute clip, and then we'll talk about it. How many of you have seen this ad before? No one. One person, right? Okay. Very interesting ad. You can see what AI does. But this is the part where I start to get into some questions that I want to put on the table for this meeting. Is a chat session an ad? Right? What if it recommends a brand as it did? Right? And the recommendation may not be explicit. Remember the way they set this up? They said ketchup, and a Heinz-looking bottle came out. So it's not, the boundary between what is an ad and what is content is beginning to disappear in generative AI content. Right? And there are ethical questions also, which I'm going to come to in a minute. Right? Here is another interesting question. Can you trust, and Amit again talked about trust, can you trust a recommendation made by an AI assistant or an AI avatar We already have recommendation algorithms where YouTube, if you're watching YouTube, it will make recommendation. If you're watching Netflix, it will make recommendations. Now imagine the recommendation coming from a human-looking avatar which speaks like your friends. Right? So these are all interesting questions, and part of the reason that I'm kind of a little bit scared, and just to put these things in context, I showed you Heinz, but I just want to recall Cambridge Analytica at this stage and think about longitudinal impact, right? An AI agent which has been working with you, or you are talking to the AI agent. I don't even know what to call it, him or her, right? How do you address an AI assistant, right? If there's an AI assistant whom you have, we've been engaging it for a year, and then it makes a recommendation. Can we trust it? Is this an ad? Right? These are all open questions. So, and I'm going to switch to the second part of my talk, which is probably, don't call me the doomsday prophecy provider, but I think it is important that we discuss this, right? None of these is real. The three pictures that you see here, well, the first picture is, of course, a fake. The second model does not exist. And the third picture that you see, the woman exists, but she's selling her voice audio prompts, which she has not spoken. She has just trained an AI agent to speak like her and then customize to the audience. None of this is real. And this is the question that we really, really need to think about. This is the world we are going into. What you see is not real. What you read is not true. What you hear is not who you think it is. Right? This is the world we are going to move into very quickly. We are already there. And I'm going to play this clip, and this is the last video.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
So here is the question that we are now, since we are going to live in a world which is, we won't be able to tell whether this is real or not. The questions that we need to ask is, how do you trust what you see on the screen? How do you know who you are talking to, even in a video call? Here is another interesting data point. If I have 3 seconds of your audio clip spoken from your voice, you can create any content in your voice. 3 seconds. That's what it takes. Okay? Fundamental questions. How do you actually know what is real? What is authentic? Right? This is a video that I highly recommend you watch. It's a 1-hour video. Of course, I won't have the time to play it here. There are 2 authors of the book and movie called The Social Dilemma. Right? Here is what marketing professionals really need to be thinking about. When you can personalize content faster, when you can drive deeper engagement and retain even more user attention, right? This is what we are striving for. This is what marketing professionals are striving for, right? And when behavior can be influenced at scale, we think of all these as good things, and in some sense they are, but there is a flip side, right? This is the flip side we are living in. Okay? Be cognizant that with great power comes great responsibility. Right? And if you look at this statement, there is a genuine existential risk we are facing, right? 95% of IT decision makers believe that this technology should be regulated. Right? 50% of AI researchers believe that there is a greater than 10% existential risk to the human race because of AI, generative AI. Right? Just to put this in context, the example from the last video, imagine would you get on a plane if 50% of the engineers believe that there's a greater than 10% chance that the plane will crash? That's what we are going towards. Right? So, and this, if you have read the book Sapiens, right, this is how people are thinking about it. This is scary stuff. Right? And while you have this power in your hands to use these tools, you need to be aware of how much power you are wielding and make sure that you use it in the right way. Right? So the question really is, and I will end with this, what can we do? Right? Yes, there's a huge opportunity. The opportunity is in personalization. The personalization at scale, driving deepening engagement and influencing consumer behavior, right? But you must protect against hallucinated output. Now, if you work with AI, when AI creates an output, whether it's text, image, audio, or video, it makes no guarantee about it being the truth or real. It speaks as it is. It may actually be false, but it gives you the answer with the same confidence, right? It learns from the people who use it. Now, that seems like a great thing, but remember that there are a lot of biases that we hold. And once you set a system in place which learns from the people who use it, from your consumers, from your users, you are opening also the door to it learning the wrong things from the wrong players. This is called data poisoning, right? You need to be sure that if you are customizing it and giving the data to it, you actually have the right to use that data, right? Are there biases in that data? Are there copyright violations that you need to be aware of? And are there privacy violations? These are all things that we need to be cognizant of if you're going to use this technology, right? So, how do we get there? The first thing is professional guardrails, right? If you are a brand, if you are an agency, or if you are a marketing professional, there are some things that you should adhere to. Note that this, as I've said this before, this is a kind of code which is influenced more by the data it is fed rather than the code it is written. And when you are creating content using generative AI, it is your responsibility, your accountability, and your credibility on the line as to what it outputs. Okay? And if you have interacted or if you start interacting with this, these kind of things will be relevant when you think about how you prompt these, what data you use, what brand data you use, where do you pick up the data, right? And if there are inherent biases in that data. The picture on the left was an extremely controversial picture. There are fashion agencies which have written about how this is not the right way to do diversity because you're actually taking away jobs for models who come from a diversity background or a different background than white. So it's become extremely controversial whether this is a good thing or not. Right? So you have to think about these things. Right? Second, technology guardrails. Right? And this is where we do a lot of work. Right? Web3, and this is for companies who work in the marketing tech sector. Right? Web3, as those of you know, blockchain, NFT space falls in the same space. But there are interesting opportunities here to kind of say, can these guardrails be provided by technology? And here is the way to think about it. Should the user know that a particular piece of content was generated by an AI agent or human? Does he have the right to know? He or she have the right to know. Do we need a made by AI digitally verifiable certificate on every content that comes out from a brand to make sure that the brand is protected? What if there's an ad where there's a fake offer being made? Does it create liability on you? Right? And how do you get the data on which you train these models for your brand? Can you use user-generated content? Do you know who those people are who are giving you that content? Will that drive your assistant or model or brand avatar in a direction that you want to take it? Is there a need for verified communities of users whose data you can use? And we believe that there are answers here in Web3 space which can offer solutions to these challenges. And lastly, I will end with this. I think there is a need for regulatory guardrails. Right? European Union has already starting to come out with these rails. But models have models have to have digital verifiable entities. Marketing bodies, which is MMA, right? Do we need to create guidelines, policies, and frameworks for generative AI? And can auditors and regulators and government bodies need to step in, right? This is where I think MMA needs to play a role, right? I will leave you with this quote from Satya Nadella, and I'll return the floor back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much, Dr. Praphul. Let's have a thunderous round of applause for Dr. Praphul for that insightful presentation. And I would now like to invite on stage Kalpana Ravi, Associate Editor, Indian Television, for a chat with Dr. Praphul that can help our audience decode the topic of AI even more. Let's please welcome her with a huge round of applause, everyone. Thank you, and over to you, Kalpana.
Thank you. You know, Dr. Praphul started off his conversation saying how scary, how afraid we should be. And when I was having a conversation with him, and I asked him a few questions to understand what generative AI is, and asked him a few questions, he said, another year or two and you will see what happens. And his conversation, his talk today does raise a lot of questions, not only for people like me who write content and who are journalists, but also to marketers and people who are brand custodians on how they're going to convince their brands as what is right, what is not right, and how as we as consumers are going to consume this kind of, what do I say, fakery, fake news, and a lot of other things put together. So Dr. Praphul, my question is, on the first thing is, what happens to data privacy? You know, data is floating all across the place now.
Yeah.
We're putting our numbers everywhere. We're giving our emails everywhere.
Yeah.
What happens to that data privacy? And how, as a consumer, how am I going to be affected by generative AI now?
So let me give you a couple of data points of what has happened, right? Twitter has stopped OpenAI, which released ChatGPT-4, from reading data from Twitter anymore, because OpenAI was paying Twitter $2 million a year for using the data. And Twitter basically, Musk said, this is too low. You need to give me more money. Right? Now, here's an interesting question. The data on Twitter, who does it belong to?
Not to me, of course.
Right? So when you look at a scenario like this, and the Twitter is not the only example, platforms like Reddit, which is another social media tool, and Substack, which is another social media platform, are all now saying there is value in our data, and we can sell this data to OpenAI models to learn it. The question is, who owns the data? Which has always been the question. It is now just exponentially more important to answer the question about who owns the data, right? The problem, it can get worse if it is not anonymized and there's personally identifiable information in the data. These models are picking it up, right? Now, what happens to it? I don't have a good answer, right? Is it scary? Yes, it is scary, right? Should we be cognizant of it? Absolutely, we should be cognizant of it. Is it something that we need to be guarding against? Yes. So the answer to all of that is yes. How do we solve it? I don't know.
That's a great answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Dr. Praphul, if you don't know, I as a lay person or people sitting over here in this room, how are they going to convince their brands? Okay, you said something about Twitter. So I have to now, or anybody who uses Twitter frequently, think twice before putting out our comments, information, you know, so that it's not used against me or taken off like you said, 3 seconds can be taken off it and used somewhere. So how does one guard against it?
So, okay, so there is the scary cat answer to this, which is don't use these platforms. Which is, so I don't use Facebook, I don't use Twitter, right? The only platform I have on is LinkedIn because that's slightly more saner. I think twice, my kids' photographs are nowhere,
Yeah, true.
right? And I try to be very, very aware of what I put out there in the public domain. Unfortunately, the vast majority does not.
True.
I think as brand custodians, we need to be aware of what marketers are asking brands to put out there. As I said, what data is it trained on? Is that data owned by the brand, or is brand only the custodian of the data while acknowledging that the data is owned by the users and consumers, right? And can you prove it? Is there an audit trail? Because regulations are coming.
Absolutely.
Regulations are coming. So you need to be able to prove in future, yes, that what I did was right, right? Otherwise, you have reputation at stake, and you have laws which are going to come very soon to say, you need to be held accountable for what you're doing. I think European Union is probably the most further ahead in this, but expect regulations to come. Whether it comes from industry bodies like MMA, which is self-regulation, or whether it comes from government, which is using data privacy laws or Digital India laws, I think they're coming.
You said something about brand custodian. Today, earlier in our times, the advertising agency was the brand custodian. Today, that line is blurred. The agency may create a communication, the content creator creates another communication, and an influencer creates another communication. At times, there is no synergy to this communication. And this can be misused. So who is responsible for it? Is it the brand who's responsible for it, or all these three people who are responsible for it?
Well, add another thing to the mix. Now they have AI generative content which is going to create this, right? So again, who is responsible? I think who is legally responsible is probably a question left for lawyers to discuss. But at the end of the day, it's the brand which gets impacted. Right? The impact always comes back to the brand, right? So I gave you the example of Levi's using a AI-generated model, right? Model in the sense,
Yeah,
fashion
true.
model, right? It's been an extremely controversial stance from saying that you are creating models in the image of your audience. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? Now, there have been people who have appreciated that you're trying to move away from a particular kind of model style to something that speaks to the audience. At the same time, as I said, there's a criticism that you're taking away jobs from models from the minorities, real human models. So, as I said again, all I have at this stage are questions, right? I don't have all the answers, but hopefully platforms like this will trigger the right debate, right? And that's the main thing today that we can offer. Let's have a conversation.
Are we losing jobs? Are people going to lose jobs in the next 2 years thanks to AI, ChatGPT, and what else more coming?
The non-diplomatic answer is yes.
That's scary. That's really very, very scary. How do brands using generative AI, like you said, Levi's or use Cadbury's, what is the kind of ROI they're getting by using generative AI?
So I think this is at the stage where the people who are using it are in the experimental and thought leadership space.
Okay.
Right? I haven't seen benchmarks on ROI. Interestingly, it will be very, and I mean, your previous question and this question are related. ROI is going to come both from traditional ROIs, which measures impact of marketing campaigns. It's also going to come from operations efficiencies, right? As we talked, right, the job which could be done by 10 people would now be done by 2 people, right? And what is scary about this is that this operations efficiency is going to hit the bottom of the pyramid, right? What that means is that the people who are doing the more mundane work, right, is going to get hit first, right? The strategy people are going to stay at the top because you don't have right now that kind of capabilities where you can create a marketing strategy. But the day-to-day work is going to get much more efficient. Efficient is a fancy word for saying we need less people, but that's what it is.
So are we moving towards a lean, mean organizations thanks to generative AI now?
I think, as I said, jobs will definitely get impacted. I think the role of humans will be in guiding, guardrailing, and governing the output of AI. So I think there's a lot of scope for reskilling. Amit talked about the learning
Yes,
organization.
yeah.
I think it's time. It's time that we take that statement very, very seriously.
Reskill ourselves.
Yes. In terms of what we do and what is the role of humans versus what is the role of AI.
You're talking about guardrails and, government getting into it, and, Europe has already started doing it. As a country in India, there will be red flags raised, on over this. How is the government circumventing, and how is an organization like MMA going to, help us guardrail these kind of things?
So I think there are early conversations happening with industry bodies like NASSCOM saying, how do we regulate this? I don't think a lot of people have understood the scale at which we are now and the tipping point at which we are now, unfortunately. And that's one of the reasons conferences like these are helpful. There are industry bodies which are looking at generative AI in particular. I think MMA, as I said, my view is we can do two things. One is, just like there's the Advising Council of India, we can create regulations of what marketing professionals should and should not do, right? It's self-declaration. Simple things like saying that we will declare that this content was created by AI. Right? Technology like Web3 can help, right? And that's where we kind of are playing our part, saying this can help. And second is, of course, going to the government and saying there are things that we can do as self-governance, but there are things that you need to do because there are bad actors in the ecosystem who need to be governed and who will not adhere to these self-regulations. So I think that's the other thing that agencies
And what happens to intellectual property with AI?
Yeah, that's a whole another can of worms, right? So there are artists and authors who have argued that OpenAI is digital bank robbery, right?
Yeah.
Because you have taken the artwork of the masters, you have taken content created by other artists, by people like you and me, by experts who have just put it out there for free. You have trained a model and who uses this data to kind of create content. Of course, these people have written the algorithms and invested in machines in millions of dollars. The question is there something due to the original content creators?
You had a movie now supposedly written by ChatGPT.
That's right.
I mean, it is like, pointing fingers at screenwriters and writers who've written great work. And suddenly you have a ChatGPT writing a script of a movie. So there is a red flag raised here also. Tomorrow, somebody will sing a song and say, I use chat AI and I'm better than A.R. Rahman.
That's right.
So where do they go now?
I don't know the answers. I mean, the only thing I can offer you are questions, some guidelines as to where we should be going, right? And that's why I think it's time. This is the discussion.
So the guidelines are for the marketers sitting over here so that they follow it, and hope MMA, gets into this act of putting, drawing a future for all of us put together. Thank you.